Hi, I'm Kat, and today I have for you a true crime case. I will also be doing my makeup at the same time, and I also have a word in Romanian for you. So let's start with the word in Romanian, which is istorie. 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 Well done, guys. You just said history. As of right now, Niels is considered the most prolific serial killer in the history of post-war Germany and maybe even in the world. Officials believe that as many as 300 patients may have died by his hand over 5 years starting in 2000. So what prevented colleagues from stopping one of the world's deadliest serial killers? Now, I have another disclaimer for you. I'm gonna be butchering a lot of words today, that's for sure. Loads of them, as they are German, so yeah. 46-year-old Niels Högel, born on 30th of December 1976, was raised in the coast town of Wilhelmshaven, Lower Saxony, in what was at the time West Germany. His grandmother and father worked as nurses, his father being employed at the St. Willehad Hospital in Wilhelmshaven, whilst his mother worked as a paralegal. Niels had an older sister, and according to him, he actually had quite a sheltered childhood without any exposure to violence at home whatsoever. After he finished his vocational training in 1997 at the St. Willehad Hospital, Niels became a nurse and continued working at the same hospital. He married in 2004, the same year that his daughter was born. From 1999, Niels was employed at the Oldenburg Clinic in the cardiac surgery intensive care unit on Ward 211. In August 2001, doctors and medical staff at the hospital held a meeting which Niels attended, talking about an unusual spike in resuscitations and deaths during the previous months. 58% of these incidents happened while Niels was on duty. After the meeting, he called in sick for 3 weeks. Whilst he was off sick, only 2 patients in Ward 211 died. This was significantly fewer than whilst he was working at the hospital. At the time, Niels believed that the hospital found out what was going on. Being under pressure by the ward's 2011's head physician, Niels was transferred to the anesthesiology ward in 2001. Very soon, the new ward's head physician became suspicious at how Niels was very often present in emergency situations. In September 2002, the Oldenburg Clinic's head physician confronted him after multiple patients under his care were found in life-threatening conditions for mysterious reasons. It was suggested that he either resign his position at the clinic and continue to receive full wages for another 3 months, or transfer to the clinic's logistics unit where he would assist moving patients throughout the hospital. On 10th of October 2002, Niels received a reference letter issued by the Oldenburg Clinic's Director of Nursing. In the letter, she said that Niels had circumspect, diligent and independent work ethic, as well as him acting prudently and in an objectively correct manner in critical situations. She also praised his devotion and cooperative conduct. The letter ended with an overall assessment of Niels having completed assigned tasks to the utmost satisfaction. So he was basically given a pat on the back and even glowing recommendations to kill somewhere else. In December 2002, Niels got a transfer to the Delmenhorst Clinic. The new nurse arrived at the intensive care unit with a solid letter of reference, describing him as someone who worked independently. In a crisis, he reacted with consideration and was technically correct, whatever that means. The letter gave no indication that officials at his former hospital in Oldenburg grew deeply suspicious about the number of deaths while Niels was on duty, or even that they banned him from contact with patients and effectively pushing him out of the clinic. At this new clinic, emergencies and deaths, mostly due to arrhythmia or sudden decreases in blood pressure, began spiking whilst Niels was on duty. This led to some of Niels' co-workers distancing themselves from him. Within 4 months, a patient, Bridget A., died under Niels' care. Others, Hans S., Christoph K., and Joseph Z., followed. They were all identified with only a last initial under the German privacy laws. Later on, it was reported that Niels was initially held in high regard at the hospital until suspicions against him began to arise. His superiors allegedly didn't act on these suspicions even when 4 empty vials of Guritmial, also known as Ajamalin, popped up in his ward, even though no doctor was prescribing any such medications at the time. Ajamalin is actually used as a test to diagnose Brugada syndrome and identify people who are at higher risk of developing life-threatening arrhythmias and sudden cardiac death. On 22nd of June 2005, Niels' colleagues caught him intentionally manipulating a patient's syringe pump to improperly administer Ajamalin. This incident prompted Delmenhorst police to open an investigation into Niels Högel. Multiple of his co-workers came forward to voice their suspicions that he was behind numerous complications, resuscitations, and unexplained deaths at their hospital. The extensive police investigation that followed these allegations examined all deaths at the hospital between 2003 and 2005, revealing that the number of deaths at the Delmenhorst clinic had doubled during Niels' employment there. In 2005, 73% of deaths could be connected to his work schedule. These findings were then forwarded to the Oldenburg District Attorney's Office. In December 2006, adjudicating the 22nd of June 2005 incident, the Landgericht Oldenburg German Regional Court sentenced Niels to 5 years in prison and an employment ban of 5 years for attempted voluntary manslaughter. A joint plaintiff appealed the verdict and the higher court then reversed it. In June 2008, Niels was then given a 7.5 years in prison sentence as well as a lifelong employment ban. From January 2014 onward, the Oldenburg District Attorney's Office initiated another investigation into the incidents at the Delmenhorst clinic. In September 2014, Niels was charged with 3 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. After confessing to the charges, he stated that he had committed 30 additional murders. The patient's deaths were caused by Niels administering 90 unauthorized injections. 60 patients were successfully resuscitated. On 20th of February 2015, the Landgericht Oldenburg sentenced Niels Högel to life in prison. The sentence became final in March 2015. Prosecutors claimed that Niels acted out of boredom and the desire to show off his resuscitation skills. Growing suspicious that Niels might be responsible for even more deaths, police launched a major investigation in October 2014, after which 200 suspicious deaths were identified. From November 2014 onward, the Special Commission Cardio examined further deaths during Niels' tenure as a nurse at various places of employment. A total of 134 bodies in Germany, Poland, and Turkey were exhumed and autopsied. During the 3-year investigation, more than 200 cases were re-evaluated. The 134 exhumed bodies were distributed across 67 different cemeteries. In many cases, decomposition progressed too far to be able to detect any traces of medication. 101 patients from Delmenhorst who died during Niels' employment couldn't be autopsied because their remains were cremated. In 2015, suspected victims were exhumed in Ganderkesee and Delmenhorst. The autopsies revealed traces of heart medication. In November 2016, authorities said they were able to prove 37 homicides attributed to Niels in Delmenhorst between December 2002 and June 2005. According to an August 2017 statement by the director of the Special Commission, Cardio, the provable Oldenburg and Delmenhorst homicides were only the tip of the iceberg. As Niels had been sentenced to life in prison without eligibility for parole at the time, further court cases wouldn't change his sentence but either find him innocent or guilty of further charges. As capital punishment is constitutionally prohibited in Germany, Niels' prior conviction had already entailed the maximum punishment of life without parole. On 28 August 2017, police announced they concluded that Niels was responsible for the deaths of at least 90 patients, including 6 for which he had already been convicted. He admitted to an undisclosed number of deaths, but in most cases was unable to actually remember specific details, although he didn't deny possibly being responsible. In November 2017, the total number of victims attributed to him was revised and it was increased to 106, with some suspicious deaths still under investigation. In January 2018, German prosecutors charged Niels with the murder of 97 patients and announced their intention to file charges against other hospital staff who failed to act. Prosecutors again claimed that Niels wanted to impress his colleagues by reviving the patients he had previously attacked. On 28 August 2017, police said that Niels used 5 different drugs, including ajamalin, sotalol, lidocaine, amiodarone, and calcium chloride. Overdoses can lead to life-threatening cardiac arrhythmia and a drop in blood pressure, causing rapid physiological deterioration in patients already ill. Can I just say something? I can't wait for this false eyelashes trend to just go away, because quite honestly, each time that I'm putting these eyelashes on, it's a real struggle. I mean, you don't see it in the video because I cut out the parts, but it literally takes me more than 10 minutes to put eyelashes on one eye, I might add, so it's a complete waste of time. I can't wait for this to get out of fashion. On 7th of March 2018, the Oldenburg Labor Court sentenced Niels to pay 47,000 euros in compensation for 2 medical opinions and various lawyers' fees. In January 2018, the Oldenburg State's Attorney's Office pressed charges against him, accusing him of having murdered 100 patients between 7th of February 2000 and 24th of June 2005, 4 separate charges that were jointly tried. The deceased were aged between 34 and 96 years. The indictment stated that in his position as a nurse, Niels killed patients by administering the following substances or medication without medical indication: potassium glyluritmal or ajamalin, sotalol, lidocaine, and amiodarone. The main trial at Landgericht Oldenburg started on 30th of October 2018. Due to the high number of people involved in this trial, as there were 100 joint plaintiffs, the trial was held in the Weserhamshallen ballrooms. The 2018-2019 court proceedings lasted a total of 24 days of trial. Out of the 100 murder charges, Niels confessed to 43 on the first day of the trial, stating he couldn't remember 52 and he denied his involvement in the 5 remaining deaths. Out of the 32 witnesses present at the trial, 8 testified under oath. 3 testimonies were heard on camera. 4 medical experts presented the court with detailed information on the courses of the patient's diseases as well as the effects of the medication administered by Niels. Professor Stoller, a forensic expert in testimony psychology, examined the truthfulness of Niels' testimony. He concluded that Niels, although in principle both capable and willing to lie or to provide false testimony, he provided the court with truthful confessions. The professor saw no indications for a false confession. The state attorney's office moved for convictions in 97 and acquittals in 3 cases. The defense saw the state of evidence to be too insufficient to convict in far more instances and moved for acquittals in 31 cases, murder convictions in 55 cases, and attempted murder convictions in 14 cases. The presiding judge in the trial, Sebastian Barman, ordered 8 of Niels' former colleagues to be investigated on perjury because of suspicion that they lied to the court or withheld evidence in the trial to cover up lapses. Revelations of apparent negligence by the hospital authorities have already led to other criminal investigations. 2 doctors and 2 head nurses from the Delmenhorst Hospital were charged with manslaughter. Niels was expected to testify at their trial after the court reached a verdict in his case, expected in June 2019. Former colleagues from Niels' early days as a nurse said that he quickly made a name for himself as someone who could handle the pressure of life or death situations. In reality, according to prosecutors, he created situations in which life and death rested in his own hands. The court described Niels' motive to emerge as a hero after a potential reanimation as base, which is a precondition for a murder conviction in Germany. Niels administered overdoses of drugs that caused cardiac arrest so that he could rush back and try to revive patients heroically. His colleagues called him Resuscitation Rambo and rewarded his skill with a necklace made of injection tubes, which he wore with pride. Of 411 deaths at the Delmenhorst Hospital during the 3 years Niels worked there, 321 happened during or just after his shifts. The authorities don't know how many patients he may have killed. The cases of only those victims who could be exhumed and autopsied for traces of medications used to treat irregular heart rhythms, but that can be fatal in high doses, were brought before the court. Dr. Karl-Heinz Bain, a leading German neurologist and head doctor of psychiatry at St. Marian Hospital in Hamm, said the nurse appeared to be driven by narcissism and the need to feel a deep lack of self-worth. He said, quote, "Niels Högel is a member of this extreme minority." Dr. Bain has researched serial killers in the medical profession since 1989. He said that what struck him about Niels' testimony was his lack of empathy, even when speaking to victims' families. For the first time, starting in 2018, Niels, who sat through previous trials silent and dejected, testified to the court. Often he would remember remarkable details surrounding the deaths. Other times he just gave the same answer: "I have no memory, but I can't rule out a manipulation." He denied killing a patient 5 times. No pleas are entered in the German court, but 2 days into his trial, Niels told the court that he felt shame when reading over the medical records of the patients aged 34 to 96. "Every single case, even just reading them," he said, "I am endlessly sorry." The apology only raised more questions about whether the words could be believed. Arne Schmidt, who is now the police chief in Cuxhaven and led the special investigation from 2014 to 2017 into the killings for the Oldenburg police, said, quote, "I personally am convinced that the defendant continues to live out his narcissism today." It was not until June 2005 that Renette T., a fellow nurse in Delmenhorst, took further action after discovering Niels standing over a lung cancer patient, Dieter Maas. His life support system had been switched off, and in the trash there were 4 empty vials of medication not prescribed for him. She quickly took a blood sample and sent it for tests. The next day, the patient was dead. When the results showed a dangerously high dose of heart medication, the doctor and nurse in charge met to discuss the situation, but they let Niels finish his shift. In those hours, René, 67 years old, became his final victim. Quote, "The course of events that took place on June 24th are symbolic of the failure of those responsible for their completely erroneous assessment of actual facts and the tragic results that ensued for the patients." End of quote. Mr. Arnschmidt said, announcing the results of his investigation in 2017. That investigation came about only after years of pressure by family members and led to the trial. On 6th of June 2019, the court in Oldenburg sentenced Niels Högel to life imprisonment. Taking prior convictions into account, the court determined his severe gravity of guilt, a German legal term which significantly increases the respective sentence's severity and precludes a chance of early release after serving 15 years. He was found guilty on 85 separate murder charges and not guilty on 15 murder charges. Niels and the joint plaintiff appealed the verdict. It became final on 11th of September 2020 when the Federal Court of Justice dismissed both appeals. A total of 80 seats were provided to media representatives and an additional 118 seats for the general public. Contrary to prior trials under high public and media attention, public interest didn't decline but rose as the trial progressed. On the first day of trial, numerous seats remained empty. The number of people attending increased significantly throughout the trial, peaking at approximately 190 spectators and 25 media representatives. The court decided that a further pending indictment against 4 employees of the Delmhorst Clinic would be tried once Niels' verdict was final. Only then he would be obligated to testify at the trial against those employees, because until he received the final verdict he still had the right to refuse testimony, and he had stated that he wished to exert that right. Following Niels' conviction in April 2015, the Oldenburg State Attorney's Office pressed obstruction of justice charges against a former Oldenburg chief prosecutor. He allegedly didn't act on conclusive evidence incriminating Niels, thereby extending investigations. However, the district court dismissed the case. After the 2015 sentence became valid, both the Delmhorst Clinic, now called Joseph Hospital Delmhorst, and the Oldenburg Clinic stated their intention to compensate the victims' relatives. In July 2015, both clinics announced plans to become the first clinics in Germany to introduce a process called qualified necropsy, involving an additional coroner. The introduction of this two-man rule aims at preventing unnatural causes of death because of criminal actions to go unnoticed. A trial against 7 former supervisors of Niels started in February 2022 in Oldenburg. According to the prosecution, the accused suspected his involvement in the patient's deaths but neglected to take any actions in order to protect the reputation of their hospitals. The number of killings and the amount of time it took for suspicions surrounding Niels' actions to come to light have raised uncomfortable questions for Germany, including whether the same deference to hierarchy and predilection for procedure that once facilitated Nazi-era crimes allowed Niels to kill uninterrupted for so long. Christian Marbach, whose grandfather was a victim of Niels, said, quote, "If it is possible that in Germany more than 300 deaths over 15 years can be swept under the carpet, what else is possible? What does it take for people in Germany to stand up and pay attention?" End of quote. Christian now speaks at nursing schools about the moral questions raised by Niels' case. According to Frank Lochsterman, the only former colleague who testified openly about working alongside Niels, a culture of looking away and keeping your head down ultimately protected Niels. At some point, his colleagues noticed that patients suddenly needed to be resuscitated when he was on duty. People die in the intensive care wards, but not so many so quickly. Susanna Kay, a former Delmhorst colleague of Niels, said that in the beginning you think it's fate, but at some point you grow distrustful. She said that Niels' colleagues in Oldenburg talked about him but didn't go to their superiors or file a complaint out of fear of being reprimanded or because they didn't see it as their business. When another nurse in Delmenhorst told her superior that she was suspicious of Niels, no action was taken and she never followed up. Two former prosecutors from Oldenburg were investigated for failing to sufficiently investigate Niels in 2005, but neither faced charges. One is actually now a judge in Oldenburg. Judge Bergman told the witness, quote, "The purpose of this trial is to provide answers for the family members whose loved ones died, to help them to understand how and why," end of quote. But Maria Ter expects more. In 2016, the police told her that they suspected her husband Adnan might have been murdered by Niels. Since then, she struggled with depression and at times even to drive to the supermarket. She said, quote, "Until this happened, I saw doctors as people who did the right thing. They were there to be trusted. But in this case, they swept everything under the carpet. I finally want justice to be served." End of quote. And this is yet another extremely tragic example of how institutions work to cover their bums and essentially pushing killers from one hospital to another with glowing recommendations, and then in the end they are not even held accountable for it. It's so sad because you go to a clinic or you go to a hospital expecting to get some help for your health, and in extreme cases such as this one, you end up losing your life just for stepping foot in a hospital. It's just crazy, it's mind-blowing, and it's still happening. It's still happening. This is, I think, the second case that I covered with a killer nurse, with a serial killer nurse, and from my research there are so many other cases of hospital staff, healthcare staff killing their patients. I cannot understand it. I can't understand it, but I guess for you to understand you would need to be a killer. So that's probably the reason why a lot of us don't understand the minds of killers. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Please let me know what do you think in the comment section down below. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!